All right, so it's 5 after, so why don't we go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone who is joining us today for this Friday Healthy Conversation. I want to let you know that this presentation is being recorded and is actually being streamed live on our YouTube channel. You are here in a sort of webinar format presentation, so you're not on the screen, but you can see our presenters today. And I would like to go ahead and take a minute to introduce our presenter today, Cindy Ogando. She is a social worker, one of my colleagues at Rhode Island Parent Information Network, or RIPIN. If at any point during her presentation you have a question, you can click the raise hand button and we will unmute you to ask your question, or you can feel free to just type the question in. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen that you can click, type in your question, and it'll get to myself and Cindy. We will do our best to answer it. With that said, I think that's it for me, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Cindy for today's presentation.
All right, thanks, Mark. I'd like to welcome everyone again. My name is Cindy Ogando. I'm a licensed clinical social worker at RIPIN, working particularly with older adults in the care management program. And welcome everyone who's attending. Like Mark said, if you have any questions, feel free to throw it into the chat box. I won't have direct access to it while I do the presentation, but Mark is going to look at that for us. So today we're going to talk a little bit about self-care, particularly self-care with chronic pain, and whether this is going to be helpful to yourself if you're a healthcare professional and you want to utilize this information for your clients and your patients. That's what this is here for. So if you have any questions, if you want to comment anything during, we're happy to do that as well. We'll have a session at the end as well where you can join in. I will start off by apologizing. I'm working from home, as most of us are, and I have children here who are doing virtual learning, so we're trying to kind of monitor all those things at once. So if you hear any background noise, that's what that is. But we'll go ahead and get started here. Let me share my screen. Okay, so yeah, we're going to talk a little bit today about self-care with chronic pain. I'll be providing some examples. We could talk a little bit about the benefits of self-care and mental health and mental well-being, and we'll be putting in some information, giving you some information in regards to that. So our overview will, like I said, we'll talk about mental health. We'll talk about the meaning of self-care. I'll give you some examples. We'll talk a little bit about the challenges, which is also a big topic as to why people don't do self-care. Some of the excuses that can come up as well to not participate and not do self-care and take care of yourself. So we'll talk a little bit about that. All right, so we'll start right off with what is mental health and what is mental ill health. The quoted description is mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities. They can cope with the normal stresses of life. They can work productively and fruitfully and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So looking at that description, it's basically a balanced whole, finding that you as an individual is balanced in every which way, and you're being a productive member of society, that you're able to manage and cope with your stresses that inevitably life will bring us. Mental health encompasses having positive capacity, which means producing and having a productivity at your acceptable limit, trying not to take on too much that exceeds that limit so that you don't burn out, so that you don't feel stressed and overwhelmed, finding ways to manage that so that if you need to say no, you can't take on an additional project, you can't take on additional clients, that you're able to understand where your limits are and being in control of them and being able to assert that information as well. Positive mental health includes positive social and emotional well-being. Social and emotional usually are used hand in hand. And it's extremely important that we have control of our emotions, that we learn, take the time to look within us and learn what these feelings mean, and finding a name for it. I know sometimes it's a little difficult to understand what this feeling is. Am I feeling upset? Is that really sadness? And finding a connection of that between your social emotional, your social well-being as well. And mental health encompasses behavior and thoughts and emotions, and how those all work together to create a positive mental health perspective. We have a couple of negatives here for mental health, which are mental ill health and lack of happiness. And what those mean is they're a set of problems that interfere with one's cognitive, social, and emotional abilities, which can include mental health issues, mental illness, which can negatively impact a positive mental health perspective. So people who do have, who suffer from concerns like disorders of bipolar, who are struggling with anxiety, depression, those can have an immediate effect on your mental health. So what does mental health look like? So mental health, one of the components is personal development, right? So it's finding a way to make sure that you as an individual is growing, growing in a variety of ways. So that can include a new activity, learning a new activity, getting educated on a particular topic, building relationships and maintaining relationships. It's just ensuring that you're providing a level of personal growth, that every day you're finding something of, even if it's a small something that improves, makes you a little bit better than you were yesterday. That brings us into another piece of the pie, which is positive and respectful relationships. So this is a biggie because, we're not on an island. We kind of do this with other people. We're not doing this all on our own. So it's super important to have positive relationships. And if you don't have positive relationships, finding ways to manage that and control that. If you need to, cut out toxic relationships or address relationships that aren't providing you with a positive growth and positive personal development, kind of addressing those issues as well, because it's super important to have positive relationships with people and kind of just cutting out anything that isn't providing a positive impact on yourself. The next piece is identifying, managing, and understanding emotions. Now, this piece is sometimes a little difficult. It can be kind of a gray area because, we weren't always told what a specific feeling means and the name of that feeling and how, feelings can have a variety of names. But being able to take some time to kind of focus on that and really zone in on what these feelings are. And if you find yourself having, high stress emotions, sometimes anger can come out. It can be shown in a very specific way when in reality, you kind of strip all that aside and it's really just frustration and it's sadness and it's confusion and it's being portrayed as anger. And it's important to kind of take a moment to, assess yourself from an outer perspective. Like, how do other people perceive my emotions? Sometimes it can look like you're angry, but that's not what you want another person to see. You want them to see that what you're feeling is frustration, not necessarily anger. And this takes some time. This takes a lot of time to really kind of pinpoint what these are, what they mean, how they make you feel, and how they make other people feel. But it's a huge part of positive mental health. Another important piece is communication. Not everybody was, is taught how to have positive communication with others. And it's important that we find ways to improve that aspect because other people, friends, family, colleagues, clients, and patients, it can have a negative impact on those relationships if you're having and struggling with communicating to others what you're trying to say. So if you are feeling a little bit frustrated, being able to kind of use those words and say things in a way that isn't going to be offensive to others, that isn't going to upset others as well. So communication is a huge piece. And one of the other pieces of the pie when it comes to mental health is being able to solve problems, to make decisions, and take responsibility. I find this a lot when I work with clients and work with patients in various job situations, is that sometimes emotions, thoughts can affect how we problem solve. And it can be from a very small problem to a very huge problem. And these are the kinds of things that we as individuals have to kind of hone in on. Like, why is it so difficult for me to come up with a solution to this problem, or even begin to think about the problem as a problem? I have clients sometimes that, you know, they get very frazzled when little things happen. For example, if clients are used to being picked up by a specific person to go to a doctor's appointment, and let's say that person can't make it, they call abruptly and say they can't make it. The clients struggle. Some of the clients struggle with being able to figuring out what to do. And I just won't go. That'll be the solution. I just won't go. But positive mental health and mental well-being and taking care of yourself and kind of taking a moment to sit back, look at the problem and saying, well, let's think of other solutions for this. Maybe I can try this and maybe I can try that. Taking that responsibility of, you know what, it's important to me that I get to that doctor's appointment. And if it's important to me, I should try to find a way. And reaching out to others if you have to help with that problem solving. But like they say, you know, you have to address the problem. You have to know there's a problem first. So these are the kinds of things that incorporate a positive mental health mindset. And lastly, and not least important at all, but setting goals. This is a gigantic piece of the puzzle, is finding ways to set goals for yourself, even in very small increments if you have to. And they can be, you know, large goals. Like they say, sometimes they have, you know, a 2-year plan or a 10-year plan. But when I talk to clients and I talk to patients and to myself, when I'm setting goals for myself, I like to start something small, something attainable. It's important to have something that you can actually reach for and not make it so that it's going to create more frustration and more stress. So sometimes it can be difficult if your goal is, you know, I'm going to quit smoking tomorrow. That can be difficult. I mean, it can be done, but you have to know yourself and know whether this is something that's going to stress you out in the process, or is it going to give you a little bit of joy while you're doing it? So it can mean, you know what, maybe I can't quit tomorrow, but I can reduce how much I smoke by 2 cigarettes a day or 3 cigarettes a day, depending on how much you smoke daily. So being able to find small attainable goals to provide you with the joy of reaching those goals. So we move on to a little bit of the same of what we're talking about, why mental health and well-being is important. We hear that a lot these days. We hear a lot about mental health and making sure that we're, you know, staying healthy and taking care of ourselves and doing things that make us happy, based on some of the happenings in the world, all over the world right now. But mental health can lead to healthier lifestyles. When you're making healthy choices for yourself, you can lead a healthier lifestyle. And that can include a better physical health. So when you start to set those little small goals, it could be, you know what, I want to walk once a day or once a week to help improve your mind, body, and soul. Give you some time to think. Give your legs sometimes to, you know, keep moving. It's been studied that positive mental health can improve recovery from illness. Like when you have a cold and you're feeling down, a positive mental health, when you really work on your mental health regularly, it can help improve some of those things. As we know, like if you're struggling with stress, if you're struggling with depression, positive mental health can kind of aid in that process of helping the recovery process. If you're having small aches and pains, this can be really helpful as well. That aligns directly with fuel limitations in daily living. So, I have some clients who don't get out very often, who don't, have very small spaces and they can't walk very far. So it kind of limits what they can and can't do. They can't stand for very long. They can't sit for very long. They can't lay for very long. So providing some changes in behavior that'll improve your mental health in the process can kind of help oil those joints, if you will, to help improve the limitations of daily living. And that's something that we talk about a lot in my program, working with older adults, is making sure that they're staying active as best as they can. So one of the other things is attaining higher education. This I have personal experience with, because I went to school for quite a few years, and I couldn't have done it if I wasn't focused on my mental health and making sure that I was keeping myself healthy in every which way. Because education is tough, and retaining a lot of information is difficult, especially as you get older. So working on it every day was helpful to me. I preach that to other people as well, is just making sure that you're working on all those pieces of your mind and giving yourself the time and the breaks to really be at your best. Positive mental health can improve greater productivity and greater employment and earnings. So when you feel good, you do good, and you increasing your productivity could mean a variety of things. It could be, I currently make myself a meal once a day, and maybe I can try to do twice a day. Or, I do something this often and I want to increase it to a different level. That can be helpful at work, and that can be helpful in personal life. Better relationships, that, as we talked about on the previous slide, is a biggie, if you will. Having positive mental health can allow for those relationships to flourish and allow you to nurture those relationships. And that leads directly into increased social cohesion. I mean, when you have a social group, whether that be friends, family, your work peers, when you have a positive attitude, when you work on yourself regularly, it can help improve those social relationships. All of these little pieces that we talked about, all of these little check marks, these pieces of the pie, as I call them, they all pretty much lead to our last bullet point on this slide, which is improvement in quality of life. Every single one of these pieces is to reach that particular goal. You can have them in a variety. You can do a little bit more of this and a little less of that, but they all kind of work together to reach an improvement quality of life, which is what we should all be striving for. Is if we have a particular life that we're living now, we want to improve that. These are kind of the bullet points of things that you should address: relationships and lifestyle and physical health, and they can all lead to an improved quality of life. Okay, so we're going to lead directly into what is self-care. Self-care is one of those terms that, particularly now, we hear a lot. I know I do, and not just because I'm in the social work field, but you turn the TV on, there's a self-care commercial. You turn the radio on, you walk out and see a billboard, because of how the world is, the peak of the point of where the world is now. Self-care is a huge piece. We need it now more than ever to help us through this process, through the process of the pandemic, through the process of social unrest, through the process of the looming, presidential election coming up. So this is like a big piece for me. I love I love sharing my thoughts on self-care and how it can be beneficial, because it's been truly beneficial to me and some of my close friends and family. Um, Self-care, the first bullet point here, is more than having a hot bath. I know that when I was growing up and when I was in school, it's kind of one of those like old wives sayings, like, oh, just take a hot bath and you'll be fine. And you know what? You might be fine. You might be fine right after the bath. But self-care is much bigger than that. Self-care is a topic. It's a process to nurture your whole, your mind, your body, and your soul. Self-care addresses all of those points to make sure that you are at your absolute best in every which way. So self-care, what it is activities that you do with the intention of enhancing your energy, restoring your health, and reducing your stress. When you do all of these things in combination, it provides you with, like my little picture here on the slide with the big heart in the middle, that is fulfillment. And that's what self-care is. It provides you with a level of fulfillment so that you can lead a much healthier lifestyle. The benefits of self-care, we kind of talked a little bit about. Greater capacity to manage stress. Managing stress is something we're going to have to do forever to the end of our days, is being able to manage the stresses that come up in our life, which is inevitable. I mean, stress in small increments and larger increments are inevitable. And self-care tools and self-care skills will help with that process. It'll help increase resilience, and it'll reduce symptoms of mental health issues. So if you are struggling with anxiety, depression, and other various mental health issues, practicing self-care is probably one of the key components of managing those symptoms and managing the stress that comes with those symptoms. So the point of self-care, kind of encompassing some of the things we're already talking about, is it increases overall enjoyment of life. So when you have positive mental health, when you're focusing on your positive well-being and you're providing yourself some regular self-care, it increases the overall enjoyment of life. Basically, you're happier. Helps you cope with stressful events and sadness. As we talked about, we have a lot of stressful events happening right now in the world, and that's just globally. I mean, that's not even including all the things that we go through individually on a day-to-day basis. So self-care can help kind of ease, using the word ease loosely, ease in very small ways sometimes, which is much needed. It can help you achieve goals and reach your potential. And maintain positive connection with others, like we talked about in the communication piece. It's important that we maintain those connections now, particularly, I'm assuming everyone else is in the same boat as I am, with being home more often than we're used to. Self-care can be specifically maintaining those positive connections with the outside world, with your peers, with your coworkers, with your school peers if you're in school, and with friends and family. Practicing positive self-care, it makes you better equipped to support the mental health and well-being of others in your life. So I have, very personal experience with this because of my particular career choice. I do a lot of therapy and counseling with clients, with families, with children. And I find that if I'm not in the right headspace, it makes it difficult to help others, makes it difficult to provide positive reinforcement to others. So I practice self-care regularly because of that, not just because it's beneficial to me, but because I know that I have other people counting on me, having parents, having children, having friends, having, relationships and spouses, having coworkers you need to be in connection with regularly. You're your better self is when you're meeting those needs, when you're being fulfilled, and when you're practicing self-care.
Cindy, is it okay if I interrupt you just for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Because we have a question that just came in that's very relevant to what you're talking about right now.
Great.
You know, it can be hard to do that self-care when you are responsible for the care of so many other people in your life. Do you have any tips for how you can sort of make that happen when maybe a lot of other people are relying on you?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the, and I have more personal experience with that too, because like I said, I have children and I have parents who rely on me, and then, a caseload of clients who rely on me to be at my best self, to provide care for them. So, I mean, my tips would be, it sounds very cliche, but it's finding the time. So whether that be 5 minutes before bed, if you find joy and you find release and you find a stress-free environment of reading for 5 minutes, or taking a few minutes or taking longer in that hot bath that they talk about all the time, taking more time there, listening to the kind of music you want to listen to. I provide an example is when I was younger, my mom, when she used to come from work, I'd watch her drive into the driveway and park her car, and she would just sit there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And I always wondered what she was doing, sitting in the driveway. And it wasn't until I became a parent and became responsible for all these other people that I realized that she was taking her self-care time. This is her time. So she would take those 10 minutes and sit in the car. And if she was listening to music, nothing at all, the news, it became more relevant of how important it was to take those moments. So I would say, find the time. We say that there isn't enough time, but there's time somewhere. We just don't know it yet. And we haven't really, peeled back all of those other things that we're doing and saying, you know what, this is my time. I'm going to take these 5-10 minutes, or if you're lucky, if you have an hour, take that hour. That's your time. And I've been practicing on that for years and years and years. And some days it's harder than others, but that's what I would do. Is I would really make it a point to stop and say, you know what, let me find where I can squeeze in 5 minutes today, because I need that time.
That's great. That's really good advice, Cindy. Thanks.
No problem. Anything else, or want me to keep going?
We do have a couple other questions if you want to try to answer some.
Yeah.
One question is, in talking about your health goals, whether it's your mental health goals, your self-care, well-being goals, do you recommend that we tell our friends or our family about those goals, that maybe they can help us stay on track?
Absolutely. I think that falls in line with nurturing those relationships. So if you have someone in your life that you can feel hold you accountable without causing stress, then I would say absolutely. But it really takes you to be responsible of picking those people appropriately. Because I have people that, even though they're loving and caring and they want the best for me, if I tell them, remind me every day to drink 8 glasses of water, maybe they're going to stress me about it the whole time, but it's important to pick the right person. It's almost like picking the right person to go on vacation with. You can't take everybody. Not everybody's going to fit that mold. But if you have those people in your life, I would say yes, absolutely. And this will kind of give them a lifeline of like, they can see that you're working on yourself, and it'll help provide a better connection with them. Like, you know what, this person is really trying to improve this particular aspect of them, and they trusted me to help them with that process. So I would absolutely say yes. If you have those people in your life, reach out to them and see, and test that out, see how it goes. If you find that it doesn't work, then you can kind of pull back and try it with someone else. But I'd always say yes, try it first, see how that works out.
Awesome. So, we're presenting these as part of the Road to Wellness Challenge leading up to World Diabetes Day on November 14th. And we have a question here now asking about self-care for people with diabetes, and how does that look different from you know, self-care for someone who doesn't have diabetes? How does it look the same?
Yeah, so our next slides coming up are going to focus a little more on self-care, but I can say now that one of the bigger differences of just overall self-care and self-care when you have a chronic condition is the medical piece. So medically making sure that when you understand your condition, whether that be through education from your doctor, Googling online, staying aware of all the changes and, you know, up-to-date information on your particular illness like diabetes. And the other two pieces are keeping your appointments and taking your medication as prescribed. There's nothing more important than, you know, taking your medication and making sure you're meeting the needs of your medical provider. I know that that can be difficult sometimes, especially now with, you know, going to see the doctor regularly, and making sure that you're kind of making those appointments and, you know, finding a driver depending on the particular age group we're talking about, finding someone to get you there. But the biggest difference is the medical piece, making sure that you're following the prescription to the T, and prescription, not just by, you know, medication, but sometimes doctors prescribe you need to walk, you know, every day for 20 minutes. That can be part of your prescription, and following that as best as you can, and finding others, similar to the last question, who can help you with those goals. I know that for me, sometimes, even though I like walking, I don't like walking alone. So if I don't have a partner, I won't go. So, you know, finding that person who can be your goal mate for that particular thing.
It's definitely easier if you don't do it alone. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cindy.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so we'll move on a little bit to the next slide, which is why self-care is so important with patients, in patients with chronic pain. So living with chronic pain is immensely challenging, and working to take care of yourself can minimize symptoms. It can increase functioning as actively as you can, and introduces a new level to the importance of self-care. Making good choices can aid to your journey, and is super important. So self-care related directly to your condition, whatever that may be, can involve particularly managing your symptoms. Nobody knows your symptoms better than you. You can try to articulate them to your doctor, to your friends, to your nurses, to, you know, your therapist, but nothing feels them better than you. So I would say is kind of making sure you're having an open conversation with yourself about what it is you're feeling, and finding the best ways to articulate that to your healthcare professional, and making sure you're doing everything you can to minimize those symptoms. This can include not just the monitoring of your symptoms, like I said, attending all the appointments with all of your medical professionals, not just your PCP, not just your, you know, orthopedist, and, you know, it has to be everyone. Taking your medication as prescribed, as I mentioned, and reaching out for medical help when you need it. If you're feeling, you know, if you're sitting there, you're thinking, you know, I've never felt this pain before, rather than doing the, you know, it'll just go away. Why don't I just lay down and it'll just go away? Is calling your doctor if you can, writing these things down, saying, you know what, every time I go to bed, it seems that for the past 3 weeks, every time I go to bed, I get this pain in my left arm. And being able to be mindful of that, like all this information is extremely helpful for when you go get medical attention. Another area that involves self-care is your everyday tasks. Being able to do day-to-day tasks when you live with chronic pain can be particularly difficult. This can include like brushing your teeth, showering, doing house chores, doing laundry, preparing, having healthy meals, and light activity with other people. So depending, I mean, chronic pain can be a spectrum, a huge spectrum of things. It can be back pain, it can be leg pain, arm pain, neck pain. So it's important that you know your limitations and try to incorporate everyday tasks as best as you can. So, you know, if it is brushing your teeth and if it causes pain to do that, finding your limits. If you can do it for 2 minutes if you do it for 1 minute, if you can get to, where you're going and pick up the brush, then we can call that a success, but asking help when you need it as well. And then managing the impact of your condition with your mental health. Managing the effect of your symptoms and trying to reduce it. So understanding how your illness works so that you can overcome it through therapy. That sort of self-care can be focused around understanding your illness and knowing that it doesn't define you. So just because you have this particular thing, that is not who you are. You are so much more than that. And not letting those symptoms hold you back from the things you want to do. Granted, that's easier said than done, I'm sure, depending on where you land on the spectrum of pain. But understanding that, I think that sometimes it's really important just to see the big picture and say, this is where this is where my limit, and these are the things that I can do up to my limit. And finding that if your spectrum point is here and you're here, you have all of the space in between to kind of have some personal growth, kind of have some goals to set. So that is also extremely, extremely important. Self-care and what it looks like when you're looking after yourself. So self-care, as far as a physical aspect, can be a healthier diet. I know that for me, that means drinking more water, or, having an apple versus that candy bar, exercising regularly, and don't get intimidated by the word exercise. It doesn't mean hopping on a bike. It doesn't mean standing on a treadmill for half an hour to 45 minutes. Exercise can be so many things. It can be just a walk around your house. If you feel like that's something that would be helpful to you, get some fresh air, have the sun hit your face, take a little walk, exercise the joints, then that's physical activity. And adequate sleep. That is something that I'm sure if you've been to a medical professional, you hear 1,000 times is get enough sleep. We now have fancy devices that tell us when we can go to sleep that'll, provide us with the 8 hours we need. But hey, if you feel like you're a 9-hour person, take your 9 hours. If you feel that you have adequate sleep with 6 hours, then you have 6 hours. But knowing that about yourself, knowing what it feels like when you don't get those 6 hours, and trying to avoid those feelings of grogginess and like, you're dragging all day. So adequate sleep is important. Monitoring and managing your stress in positive ways, making time for relaxation. That goes back to those few minutes we were talking about with my mom in her car. She needed those 10 minutes to be the best mom she can be, and she was, and she still is. And I thank her for taking those 10 minutes. And even though your friends and family may not know that you're taking that time to be the best you can be, they are silently thanking you. So take the time when it's available. Limit the use of alcohol and substances. As we know, alcohol and any substances can diminish the value of any medication, of any prescription, of any mental health and self-care that you're doing. So if you are doing any of those things, reducing it or taking it all together would just give you the best benefit of self-care. Fostering and maintaining personal relationships, like we talked about. If you have positive relationships or even any relationships that you're looking to improve, this is how you do it through self-care, is making sure that you're at your best so that you can put forward your best. Striving for balance between work and personal life, which is a struggle, I'm sure everyone knows. But I was told years and years ago that no one's more important than you. So you need to find a balance. I know work's important in every aspect, but you need to take care of yourself in order to be able to take care of others. Medically, taking the medication as prescribed and keeping all medical appointments. The work study piece, so developing interests and friends outside of your work study environment. So if you're one of those people that's only surrounded by work all the time, we have to start working a little bit outside of that comfort zone and finding, making yourself a little bit uncomfortable to reach the goal of positivity and having positive relationships. Spirituality is very important. Making time for regular spiritual practice or relationships with others who share your philosophy. that can be extremely healing to the mind, to the body, and the soul, is making sure that you're meeting your spiritual needs. And asking for help and support when needed. This is a difficult piece as well. And I have personal experience with that because, you know, being a therapist, sometimes it's hard to ask for help, but this is extremely, extremely important. Whether that's help in a very small scale or large scale, it can mean, you know, the world. And sometimes it can mean the world to you and to the person you're asking, like, wow, this person is entrusting me with telling me that they need a little help, they need a little assistance. So never be afraid to just say that you need a little bit of help. Okay, so self-care challenges. So this part, I think I've been every one of these people at one point of my life, and I love to really stress how important it is. So, you know, when you tell people that they should practice self-care, I, as a counselor, as a therapist, as a social worker, get a lot of pushback. I don't have time. I don't have time. I can't do it. Nope. I don't know how. I don't want to learn how. You know, I shouldn't have to. I get lots of that all the time. So I like to kind of break down some of those challenges so that if you know that you're one of these people and you have you've said one of these phrases before, we're going to talk a little bit about that now. So there's something called the carer mindset. That means that you're the kind of person that says things like, it's more important for me to help other people than for me to help myself. I know that being a parent, sometimes we fall into that category of, it's more important that I take care of them than I take care of myself when I have time, when I can, and kind of put yourself on the back burner. So those are one of the challenges we come across a lot. And it's like, no, like we said, it's important to take care of yourself first. It's like on a plane when they say, put the mask on first and put the mask on someone else. That's exactly like this. Work on yourself so that you can best serve other people. The superhero mindset, another one that I struggled with for a while. This is I should be able to cope. I should be able to do this on my own. For me, this is I'm a therapist. I know I was educated in this particular field. I should be able to do this all by myself. I don't see why I should ask for help for anyone, from anyone. So, we're not living on an island. Like I said before, it takes a village. It truly does. I know it sounds cliche, but it takes a village. And we're not superheroes in that particular way. We're all superheroes in our own right. But we can't do it all on our own. So it's important to remember that there's no should. You shouldn't, there's no should involved. You don't have to be able to cope on your own. Asking for help doesn't make you any weaker. Then there's the time and competing priorities portion, which means like, I'm too busy. I don't have time. Or you know what, I'll focus on self-care after I do these things. Fill that blank in with anything. After I, finish school, after I clear my caseload, after I, take care of the kids. That's what that challenge is now I don't have time to do it. But like I told you before, if we work on it, if we dig deep, we can find the time. It can be getting up 10 minutes earlier and sitting outside drinking your coffee all by yourself without, the kids buzzing in your ear. Or sitting in that car like my mom did. So the time is there. We just need to focus and find it. You can, another challenge is it's not part of my routine. That's like, I'm not really motivated to try that. It's too hard for me to change my habits now. I'm kind of stuck doing what I'm doing and I don't want to have to change. So we try to challenge that as well with, sometimes we have to step outside of that box a little bit. Workplace culture and lack of support. That's like, no one I know is practicing self-care, so why should I have to do it? Or, I don't really have anyone that's going to be encouraging to me, which, like I said, sometimes we need that extra person to say, you know what, I think you should take 10 minutes. I think, you've been working really hard. How about you take 10 minutes to yourself and then you can kind of bounce back. So finding those supports and finding those relationships is important as well. So we only have about 10 minutes or so left and we're kind of wrapping up here. And this is basically the take home messages I want everyone here to go home with. Your well-being is as important as everyone else's well-being. So you are just as important as everyone else, just as important as the kids, as the friends, as the moms, the dads, the spouses, the workload. So don't ever diminish yourself and think that you're not, at that level of importance. You are. Looking at after yourself isn't selfish. It's not selfish to take those 10 minutes. And even though it may feel that way, you may even have people in your life that could make you feel that way. Don't believe them. Don't listen to that. Listen to yourself and listen to that little voice inside you that says, you know what? I needed this. I needed that time. And lastly, by caring for yourself, you are better able to care for others. I am true testament of that. I mean, I have, 2 kids that need of me as much as I need of them. And I wouldn't be able to give them the best of me if I wasn't taking care of myself regularly. Practicing self-care doesn't have to be a bullet on your calendar. It can be, sitting, after you finish watching the show you like, putting it on mute and just kind of absorbing 10 minutes on your own. It can be listening to that music you like. It can be, having a glass of wine if that's something that brings you joy. It can be that. So I would encourage that. Take care of yourself. This is in probably our lifetime, there will be no more important time than now that we take care of ourselves and take care of each other. And lastly, we have my sharing moments screen, which if we had more time, we could probably sit here and talk about, self-care forever. But if you'd like to share, share in the chat, or if you wanted to unmute yourself, I think we can do that. And share like what you do for self-care. If it's different than things that I talked about, we can do that. But if you have questions, this is the time.
So yes, folks can raise their hand and we can unmute them if they want to ask a question or share. Going back to a little bit what you were saying earlier in the presentation about mental health, I wonder if you could talk, and you touched on this, but I wonder if you could say anything more about what role does mindfulness play in mental health?
Oh, mindfulness. Mindfulness can play a huge role. I think, mindfulness is something that not everybody practices, or sometimes they don't know they're practicing and they already do it on their own. But it's ties in line sometimes with meditation and how that can kind of ease the brain and the mind, and just letting go of all the thoughts and letting go of all the worries for a very specific amount of time. And how when you clear your head and you clear your mind can be, it's like, water to the soul, so to speak. It's like washes away some of those worries and concerns, even if for that small period of time. So if anybody on this panel hasn't practiced mindfulness, I think it would be really beneficial. They have lots of stuff on YouTube. They have lots of, little meditation pieces all over the place that you can kind of tap into and see what's comfortable for you. But mindfulness can be extremely beneficial to the mind, particularly to help clear up, help you see things a little more clearly, see the big picture.
That's great, Cindy. I guess I can ask this question before we wrap up. So we're getting close to the end, but again, as you were talking about mental health care, the thought that I kept having was, is there a way that you can overcome that sort of anxiety or kind of fear of saying the wrong thing? Maybe if you see someone else who you feel like is struggling with a mental health issue, how can you approach them in a way that doesn't sort of maybe make them feel like they're under a microscope or put them on the spot?
Well, yeah, like you said, mental health can be a touchy subject for a lot of people. Some people are more comfortable talking about it. Some people really aren't. And that can be a cultural thing as well. So if I had to give advice on this particular topic, I would say, very simply, know your audience. So know who the person is and kind of thinking about how they would react with that kind of thing. Some people are very private and it's like, I don't need you talking to me about like, this is my thing. You don't have to point that out. So knowing who you're talking to, if that person is open and willing to have those kinds of conversations with you, if you have a good relationship with them, You can start by just asking some very simple questions of like, how are you feeling? How are things going? And is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything I can do for you to help ease, whether that's your workload or like, I see that you're really stressed over having to do all these things. How about I give you 10 minutes, to just go take a walk around the work, the building where if you work or something like that, or go take 10 minutes on your own. And then we can come back and we can talk about anything if you want to talk. I know my boss does that for me. Sometimes she'll say, you know what, take take 10 minutes and then we can reconvene and see if there's anything you want to talk about. But I think it's extremely powerful when another person understands what's happening with you and gives you that space and says, you know what, I see you, I see what's going on, and I'm going to give you a moment to either share with me or give you a moment to yourself so that you can be the better version of you. But having those conversations can be tricky. I would say that, to avoid straining relationships, you have to know who it is you're addressing before just jumping in and saying things like, you look stressed. So.
That's great. Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody who joined us today for this conversation and remind you that we are doing this every Friday from now up until World Diabetes Day on November 14th. You can visit riwdd.org. I think that's right. Yes, riwdd.org to learn more about this and other World Diabetes Day programming. Thank you very much, Cindy, for your excellent presentation, for this great information today. With that, I will say have the good rest of your afternoon and stay safe.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.